to the ants in the street. Every single thing upon this earth at one time worshipped only Allah. Meaning, they submitted to only Allah. They asked only to Allah. They prostrated only to Allah. Nothing else was worshipped upon this earth except for Allah. Then there came a time where 5 noble, righteous men who were loved by their community for their God-fearing, their righteousness, their goodness, their worship, their community service, their giving, their kindness, their care for their people, they passed away. And so, naturally what happens, there's an emotional void. When you love someone so much for the benefit that they gave you, for the legacy that they left behind, you have this emotional void. And so what did Shaytan do? Shaytan used this as an opportunity to strike and to carry out his mission. And what was Shaytan's mission? Allah tells us in the Quran exactly what Shaytan tells Allah he is going to do. That he is going to make it his mission. What? Allah, he said, لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ. That I will stand and I will wait in ambush on your path, O Allah. This is his life's mission, his creation, the purpose of his creation, the reason he is existent is so that he can lie in wait and ambush us on that straight path of Allah's. He will come to us from in front of us, from behind us, from the right of us to the left of us. And he will try to sway us from this path, from the path of Allah. And so these 5 noble men, they passed away. And so then what happened? Shaitan went to them. And they tried to fill that emotional void. And he said, you know what? Why don't you create a statue of these people so that when you're in the marketplaces and you're passing through, you will remember them. Sounds good. It sounds okay. And so they thought it was a good idea. And they did so, and so they remembered them, and that made them feel a little better. And that generation passed away. Now their children, when they're growing up, the next generation, Shaitan comes to them and says, your forefathers, your parents, they love these people so much. You should also love them and remember them. So why don't you bring them into your homes? Like create like statues so you don't have to go to the marketplaces to remember them. You can remember them morning and night in your own house. Sounds like a good idea. So they took those statues and those idols, and each one of those homes, they made a statue and idol for themselves in the house so that they could remember these men. And again, up until this point, it seems okay. Then the next generation, those children, they grew up, they passed away. Now their children, the next generation, it's now 3 generations removed. Those generation of people, they start growing up. And Shaitan goes to them and says, your forefathers used to worship these people. They used to worship these idols. So you too should worship them. You too should prostrate to them, submit to them, sacrifice to them, ask of them. Because this is what your forefathers used to. You don't want to go away from what your forefathers did. Of course not. And slowly but surely, this is how we went from something so pure as worship of only one God to the most despicable thing that can really happen on this earth, and that is making partners with Allah or associating anything else other than Allah. Going from something so pleasant and beautiful to going to something so ugly. Going from something that is so healthy, so good, to something that is so cancerous. How does that happen? Well, we look and we see how it happened. It happened slowly. It happened subtly. with small changes. And over time, Shaytan used that way to completely take people from here to all the way the other end. Just because of working slowly, diligently, subtly, being able to skew and misguide people. And this is the reality that we have to pay attention to. The misguidance doesn't just come like, oh, like I'm misguided. It just happened. You won't even realize it. We won't even realize it. That's how subtle Shaytan is going to be. That's how subtle and over time Shaytan plays. He's not worried about you. But you know who he is worried about? Your children, your children's children, and your children's children's children. You, he might let pass, but he might give you one small change. And then that'll be adopted and established. And he'll wait for the next generation and he'll twist them just a little bit more. And you'll continue doing this until they were going in this direction and now they're completely in the other direction. You know, if we look at, the World Cup just passed. And so a lot of people flew out from, Pearson to Qatar. And so if you do the math, actually, if you were 1 degree off, let's say, from the path, from Pearson to Qatar airport, just 1 degree. It's a 13 or 14 hour flight. So over 14 hours, 1 degree off, you would be 180 kilometers off of your target of where you needed to land. So either you'd be in Saudi or you would be in the Gulf. You'd be in the water. So on one end, you'd either be dead or on the other end at least, but you wouldn't be at your destination. Right? And this is just over 14 hours. 1 degree. Now imagine Shaytan working on you day by day. Generation after generation after generation after generation. We're not talking 13 hours. We're talking 13,000 million hours maybe. In terms of the amount of hours that he's working on us. And all he needs to do is shift us 1 degree. That's it. And that's all. He's not going to make us think that, we're doing something so bad or this is going to lead to anything. It's just, we won't think anything of it. But over time, 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree. Next thing you know, our children or our grandchildren aren't even Muslim anymore. And why? Because we compromised on those small things. Because we didn't hold our ground. We didn't establish the red line and say, no. This is something I don't cross on. This is not something I will bend over for. This is not something I will compromise about. These are my morals. These are my values. This is what I believe in. And that's that. But once we start treading that line and we start shifting and we start, maneuvering a little bit in terms of what our ideals are, what our morals and ethics are, what we believe in and what we don't believe in. Once we start, Shaytan will take advantage of that. And again, like I said, he's not worried about you. But he is going to make sure that your children's children, the generations to come, that's who he's really working on. He's working generations ahead. And so the question is, what are we going to do to uphold our religion, our values, our system, our way of thinking, our ideals, our norms, what we believe in? What are we going to do to protect that for the future generations? أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله ولكم استغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. And so the thing we really need to pay attention to, and for all of us, for the elders amongst us who are parents and who have children, and even for the kids, the youth, the teens amongst us who are living and not maybe thinking too much about these things. The reality is we might today think it's just something, everybody's doing it around me, whatever. It's not a big deal. That concept of it's not a big deal is exactly what's going to land you in problems and difficulties. Because imagine, life. You're traveling upwards on a hill. Life is an upwards battle. And so you're traveling, you're going up, and you get to a point. Now, if you're on top of this mountain or this hill, and you slip once, okay, it's not a big deal. You can catch yourself, no worries. You slip twice, okay, now you're kind of putting yourself into dangerous category. But now imagine you're at the top of this hill and you keep slipping. 1, 2, 3, 4. What's going to happen? All of a sudden, you're at the bottom of the hill. All of a sudden, you've dropped so quickly, so fast, because you've let yourself slip. Those things that we thought were small, those things that we thought weren't a big deal, those things that didn't seem like, oh, it's okay, no issue. It's just music. It's just, these TV shows. It's just, these cultural ideals of other people. It's just Christmas. It's just New Year's. It's just these types of things. We don't think too much of it. But sure. And right now, maybe it's not a big deal. But those 1 slip, 2 slip, 3 slip, 4 slips, 5 slips, and you're rolling down the bottom of the hill. And at that point, it might be very, very, very difficult to catch yourself. And so it's really, really critical that we're aware of what's happening. And we're aware of everything that is happening around us. Allah tells us, وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. Right? Do not follow the footsteps of Shaytan. Do not follow the footsteps of Shaytan. This is really interesting, right? Because footsteps meaning Shaytan's not in front of you, right? It's not like Shaytan is right in front of you so you can identify that this is Shaytan. You don't. But you're looking at the signs. The signs which lead to, looks like Shaytan's path, right? And so it is naturally difficult, actually, to decipher at times. And especially in the world that we live in today, where things are constantly blurred. Right? The right and wrong, the line between right and wrong is blurred. Good and evil is blurred. Decency and shame is blurred. It's kind of like an eraser. You draw a line with an eraser, you try to erase it, you still see the marks, right? It's really hard to sometimes, if you've drawn it thick enough and you're trying to erase it over and over and over again, it still looks so smudgy. You can't really tell what the line is anymore. And that's kind of the confusion we have found ourselves in. And so for us, it's very, very important that we are not just looking at things from an angle of now what is right and wrong. It's very easy to get caught up into saying, but this is right, and it's okay, there's nothing wrong with this. And we can justify anything in the world we live in today. So the type of thinking has to actually rise a little bit. It cannot just be about what is right and wrong, because we can find evidences, proof, reasoning for anything. Anything. Whether it's good or bad. So the question is then, how do we decipher? We have to start thinking at a higher level. And what I mean by that is, now we have to start thinking about, where do our actions lead to? What is the response, or what is the consequence of this action that I'm about to take? It's not enough to just say, okay, this action, it's okay, or it seems okay, so I can do it. No. Because now we have to think about and raise our level of thinking and say, okay, but if I do this, even if there's, justification for it, even, okay, so some people say yes, some people say no, it's not that big of a deal. You start justifying it to yourself. You start reasoning with yourself and say it's okay. You can do that. But really what you have to see is now is this action, where is it going? If I let it happen, what will happen to me later on? How is this going to end up in the future? How is this going to end up for my family? How is this going to end up for the next generation? How is this going to end? Where is it going? Because once you're able to detect, okay, this is going in that direction. Oh, no. Right? You automatically now have some foresight to say, okay, this is going in the wrong direction. Even though I might not be 100% clear of where it's going, but it's definitely going in a wrong direction. So I have to stop. I have to hold a red line. Right? This is something that I will not compromise on. And so the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was once with his companions, right? And he drew a straight line in the ground. Right? He was with the Sahabas and he drew a straight line in the ground. And then he drew lines going horizontal from them, like this. So he told the companions, this straight line is the path of Allah. This is Allah's path. And these horizontal lines on each end of them, they are shayateen. They are devils that are calling you one way or the other. That are calling us one way or the other. And so our real job and task ahead of us is how are we going to maintain sticking to that line? And of the ways that we can do that is by being really aware of the small slips, the small changes, the small things that we might not think too much about, right? We might not pay too much attention to. We might make a justification for it. But if we were to really think about it in the long run, we can see that it's going to end up somewhere really bad. We have to start thinking at that level. Just like I opened up how the most despicable things started in this world of others being worshipped besides Allah. How did it happen? Just small things over just 3 generations. That's it. It didn't take too much time. So imagine if we don't stand up for what is right and wrong today for ourselves. We're talking just your children's children. That's it. That's it. If we don't hold our ground, that's all it takes for things to go south really quickly. And then who will be responsible for that in the sight of Allah? It will be us. It will be us. And so the question then becomes, what do we do? This is definitely a nuanced topic, right? It's not like a solution that can be given over the minbar in 20 minutes. It's actually a very, very nuanced topic. And everyone has different issues and dilemmas and things that are becoming barriers on the path, that are causing confusion and doubts and don't know where to go, left, right, and all that. There's tons of it. So I'm going to give some general advice that hopefully is relevant to everybody here. And so the first thing that I need everybody to understand, the youth amongst us, the adults amongst us, the parents amongst us, the children amongst us, right? The men of us, the women of us, all of us. The first thing I'd like to recommend is stop acting like cattle. Stop acting like animals. What do I mean by this? Allah tells us in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ ذَرَأْنَا لِجَهَنَّمَ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا لَهُمْ أَعْيُنٌ لَا يَبْصُرُونَ بِهَا لَهُمْ آذَانٌ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا أُولَئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ أُولَئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. That Allah has destined for many amongst the jinn and the ins, the human beings, hellfire. Why? Because they have hearts with which they don't understand. They have eyes with which they do not see. They have ears with which they do not hear. They are like cattle. They are like cattle. Nope, rather, they are far worse than that. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. These are the heedless ones, Allah says. Cattle, the nature of animals and cattle is very simple. They follow the flock. Whatever's happening around them, whatever's happening on TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp, Snapchat, all this stuff, whatever's happening in our world, that's what we follow. That is a prime definition of cattle and animals. That they don't think, they don't ponder, they're not looking at what's happening. And so what's required first and foremost, think. Open your hearts, your eyes, your ears. Do not be like cattle. Do not just follow the flock because that's where everything is heading. Open your eyes and ears and your hearts and pay attention to what is happening. That is what is required of us, the first thing. The second piece of advice is how are we supposed to know what path we're supposed to walk upon if we don't know what the path is to begin with? Right? How are we supposed to differentiate between the footsteps of Shaytan and the path of Allah if we don't know what the path of Allah is? Right? If we don't know the parameters, if we don't know what is and isn't Allah's path. And so with everything, our base understanding, our base kind of, the footsteps on this path of Allah has to come with knowledge and understanding. Meaning, what do I mean by this? Especially for the younger generation. it is not sufficient to just accept Islam, religion, as something that was just handed down. It's not. Because we live in a world where doubts, confusion, different ideologies, different information are bombarding us left, right, and center. And so just saying, I just believe because my parents believe is not going to help in those face of those trials and tribulations. So we have to come to that conclusion that Islam is the final and the true way, that Allah's path is Islam, on our own accord. And the only way to do that is through knowledge and understanding. And the base of that path, the first thing we have to understand about that path is, as Allah tells us, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know for a fact that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah. Like we hear this, like we know growing up, La ilaha illallah, right? We hear it, we're taught it, but what does it mean? What's the reality of it? What's the understanding of it? Right? None of us, very little, few are grown up really understanding what this kalima means. What does La ilaha illallah really mean? What is the defining characteristic? Why is La ilaha illallah the defining characteristic of our religion? Why does it differentiate us against all of humanity? Why? Right? We can't answer those for ourselves. That's a problem. Right? We have to learn and understand. It starts with fa'lam, know, meaning take the necessary means. Learn, reflect, think, ponder, ask. Take the means so that you can come to the conclusion, La ilaha illallah, that there's nothing worthy of worship except Allah. And on top of that, right, that's the base level. But what's also required is to understand then, on top of that, is the parameters of our religion. The parameters, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he told us, Al-halalu bayin wal-haramu bayin. Meaning the halal is clear and the haram is clear. And that which is in between them are the doubtful matters, are the gray areas. But not a lot of people, basically very few from amongst people know those gray areas, understand those gray areas, those doubtful matters. And so whosoever clears themselves of what is in that, or whosoever delves into those doubtful matters, they will find many confusion, many difficulties for themselves. But whosoever strays clear of those doubtful matters, they will protect themselves with regards to their honor and their faith. Right? We have a habit of delving into the doubtful, when Allah has told us the halal is clear and the haram is clear. So that's where it starts. Right? When we talk about learning and understanding our religion, it starts with understanding the foundation, La ilaha illallah, and then understanding what are the parameters, what is the boundary, what is the sanctuary, what is the sacredness, what is the border around which we can work within. Because a lot of us don't know those borders, don't know the parameters, and that's why there's so much confusion. Right? So understand what is halal and learn what is haram. That's the second thing. First is, do not be like cattle. Think, reflect, ponder, use your intellect and what Allah has given us to think and not just follow the flock. Second, learn and understand. What is this path? What is Allah's path? What is required of it? What is it in reality compared to other paths? It's important that we learn that. And then the last thing is, and this is specifically really for parents who are dealing with youth. The reality is youth today are going through a time and a period in our world, in our history, that we cannot fathom. We really cannot understand in terms of how much information, how much knowledge, how many ideas, how much is being thrown at them in one time. It's very, very hard, even though if you're a second generation who's seen it. Like me, I have kids who are growing up here. I saw it, but I wasn't born and raised into it. Our kids are literally growing up in a time and a period that is unheard of in terms of the amount of ideas and things that are being thrown at them left, right, and center. But you know what doesn't help? Is when they're trying to figure things out, you have parents who are on them like an iron fist. Right? Who are like hammering down on them always what is right and what is wrong, what is right, what is wrong. This is what you should be doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing. Like without actual hikmah, without actual compassion and understanding of what they're going through. Because the reality is, no one comes to conviction, no one comes to certainty of deen, of religion, overnight. It doesn't happen like that. They need time, they need support, they need mentorship, they need people around them who will support them in their answers and questions. Right? And what that means, and this is what I need you to take away, is they will make mistakes. Meaning they will fall flat on their faces many times. And you know what our job is? Is to get them back on their feet, not to dig the grave in the hole, in the ground. Our job is to lift them up, not to sink them further down. And that's what we've been doing a lot. So it's really important that we're patient, we're understanding, we're supportive, and if we don't know the answers, we guide them towards those institutes and those places where there are guidance and mentorship for them. That's the role that we need to play, more than anything, and be patient with them, because it's very critical right now in terms of the things that are happening. And more than anything, they need compassion and time and support through that process. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by His most beautiful and grandest of names that He makes us amongst those who tread the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim. We ask Allah to give istiqamah to our young ones. We ask Allah to give them firmness in their faith, in their religion. We ask them to give them life upon Islam and death upon Islam, and all of us. We ask Allah to forgive us for our shortcomings and sins. We ask Allah that just as He's gathered us here today, and He gathers us in the best of gatherings in Al-Firdaus Al-A'la with the Prophet and the messengers. We ask Allah that He rectifies the conditions of our communities as a whole. We ask Allah to aid our health, our sick ones, to give them health. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give strength to our weak ones. And we ask Allah to send His peace and His blessings upon our beloved Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Aqim as-salam. Before we do stand up for salah, one small thing. I am noticing that there is a lot of people who are on their devices during the khutbah. So it's very important, very critical that once the khutbah begins, you put your phones away, you don't say salam to people.